David Reed pushed his tray along the meal distribution line and stared at the gray cube on his plate. According to the digital display, this cube contained all the nutrients his human body needed for the day. It even had the exact flavors of roasted chicken programmed into its molecular structure. He picked it up and bit into it. The taste was there, technically correct, but something felt wrong. It was like eating a memory of food rather than actual food. Around him, students from 12 different species collected their own nutritional cubes. They seemed perfectly happy with their meals. Petra, his classmate from the silicate species, hummed a pleasant frequency as her crystalline fingers broke apart her mineral cube. Next to her, Moth from the Hiver colony clicked his mandibles with satisfaction. Ral, the deepling, absorbed his liquid nutrition cube through his skin pores. Everyone acted like this was normal. David had been at the Galactic Culinary Institute for 3 weeks now. He came here with excitement, hoping to learn about alien foods and share human cooking techniques. Instead, he found himself in what felt like a chemistry lab pretending to be a kitchen. Every lesson focused on molecular synthesis, precision temperature control down to the decimal point, and nutrient optimization. Nobody actually cooked anything. They programmed machines to assemble food at the atomic level. The Institute occupied an entire section of Station Harmony, one of the largest diplomatic stations in known space. Humans had only joined the galactic community 15 years ago, and David felt proud to be among the first human students here. But his pride was starting to mix with confusion. Where were the stoves? Where were the pots and pans? Why did everyone look horrified when he mentioned using a knife to chop vegetables? During afternoon class, Master Chef Oren entered the instruction hall. Oren belonged to the hexapod species and had 6 arms that moved with practiced grace. His reputation stretched across 7 star systems as the finest culinary educator in the galaxy. Students fell silent as he moved to the front of the room. "Students, attention please," Oren announced, his translator device rendering his clicks and whistles into perfect standard speech. "The semester final challenge has been approved by the administration. This year you will prepare a meal using only primitive methods." Excited whispers filled the room. David leaned forward with interest. Finally, something that sounded like actual cooking. Oren continued. "You will have access to thermal regulation units from the 3rd technological era, basic molecular arrangers, without quantum assistance and manual preparation tools. The Galactic Council members will attend as honored guests. This is your opportunity to demonstrate your understanding of historical food preparation." David raised his hand. "Excuse me, Master Chef. When you say primitive methods, do you mean like cooking with fire?" The room went completely silent. Every student turned to stare at David. Petra's crystalline body flickered with orange warning colors. Moth's antennae flattened against his head in a fear response. Even Ral, usually calm, retreated slightly into his moisture suit. Oren's face, difficult for David to read due to the differences in their species, seemed to show something between shock and concern. "Mr. Reed, we do not joke about combustion-based food preparation in this institution." "I'm not joking," David said, genuinely confused. "On Earth, we still cook with fire all the time. Grilling, campfires, wood-fired ovens. It's normal." Oren's 6 arms crossed, and what David had learned was a gesture of serious disapproval. "Mr. Reed, please remain after class. The rest of you begin researching 3rd-era cooking techniques. Dismissed." As the other students hurried out, many casting worried glances at David, he approached Oren's desk. The Master Chef pulled up a BO holographic display showing images of burning buildings, destroyed settlements, and accident reports. "David," Oren said, using his first name for the first time, "I understand humans are new to galactic society. Perhaps you don't know the history. Most species abandoned combustion cooking thousands of years ago. The hexapods lost an entire city to a kitchen fire 3,000 years ago. The silicates had colony-ending disasters from heat accidents. Fire is classified as a Class 7 hazard on every space station in the galaxy. It is banned, restricted, and feared for very good reasons." David looked at the images and felt understanding dawn. "But humans have been cooking with fire for hundreds of thousands of years. We're really good at it. We know how to make it safe." Oren's expression softened slightly. Your species is young in space travel. You still do many things that others consider reckless. We don't judge humans for this. But here on this station, we follow protocols that keep everyone safe. The primitive methods I mentioned are still highly controlled, just less advanced than current technology. Please don't mention open flames again. It frightens the other students. David nodded slowly, but his mind was already working. The final challenge was about primitive cooking methods. Everyone else would use devices that were ancient by galactic standards but still futuristic by human ones. They would struggle because they'd never actually felt heat, never learned to read a cooking surface, never developed intuition for when food was done. They learned cooking like a mathematical formula, not an art. He thought about his grandmother's kitchen back on Earth. The gas stove that clicked when you turned it on, the cast iron skillet that had been in the family for generations, the smell of bread baking in the oven. Real cooking, with real heat, creating real food that satisfied something deeper than just nutritional needs. That evening, David sat in his quarters and composed a formal proposal to the Institute administration. He would demonstrate fire cooking in a controlled environment. He would show them that humans hadn't kept this ancient method because they were too primitive to advance. They kept it because it worked, because it was better, because food cooked over fire tasted like it was supposed to taste. He hit send on the proposal and leaned back. Either they would approve it, or they would think he was crazy. Maybe both. But David knew one thing for certain. If he was going to teach the galaxy about human food, he needed to show them real cooking. And real cooking meant fire. 3 days passed before David received a response to his proposal. During that time, word had spread about the human who wanted to bring fire onto the station. Students avoided him in the corridors. Even Petra, who had been friendly before, kept her distance. David ate his nutritional cubes alone and wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The message finally came through on his personal datapad during breakfast. Proposal denied. Safety protocols cannot be compromised. Please report to Master Chef Oren's office immediately. David's heart sank as he made his way through the station's gleaming corridors. Oren's office was filled with cooking, implements from 100 different worlds. Crystalline whisks that sang when stirred, magnetic cutting boards that held ingredients perfectly, temperature probes that could measure heat in 17 different dimensional frequencies, all of it useless for what David wanted to do. Sit down, David, Oren said, gesturing to a chair designed for beings with more or fewer legs than humans. David adjusted it and sat. Your proposal was read by the entire safety committee. 3 members recommended you be expelled from the program. David started to protest, but Oren raised 2 of his 6 hands. However, 5 members, including myself, found the proposal intriguing. We watched videos you included from Earth. Humans sitting around fires, cooking food, laughing together. It was beautiful. It was also terrifying. Master Chef, I promise it's safe when done properly, David said. Humans do this every day. We have it in our parks, our backyards, our beaches. Kids learn fire safety in school. It's part of our culture. Oren pulled up a holographic display. It showed a disaster report from the Hiver homeworld, dated almost 2,000 years ago. The Hivers once used thermal cooking. A single spark reached their papery nesting structures. 40,000 individuals died in 3 hours. This is why Moth fears fire instinctively. His species' genetic memory carries that trauma. More images appeared. Silicate colonies cracked by thermal shock. Deepling settlements where heat dried their moisture barriers. Hexapod cities where uncontrolled flames spread through connected buildings. Each disaster was meticulously documented. Each loss of life carefully recorded. Every species here has reasons to fear fire, Oren continued. And then humans arrive, treating it like a friendly pet. Do you understand why this seems insane to us? David looked at the images and felt the weight of all that history. But he also thought about his own species' history. Master Chef, humans have disasters too. We've burned forests, destroyed cities, hurt ourselves learning. But we didn't abandon fire. We learned to control it better. We developed safety measures, building codes, fire departments. We made it part of our lives safely because the benefits were worth the effort. Oren was quiet for a long moment. His 6 arms moved in patterns that David had learned meant deep thinking. Finally, he spoke. The Galactic Council representatives heard about your proposal. They're curious. Against my better judgment and with severe restrictions, you have permission for 1 demonstration. David felt excitement surge through him. Really, thank you. I won't let you down. Wait, Oren said firmly. Listen to the conditions. You will work in Testing Bay 7, which is designed for hazardous material experiments. The bay has automatic fire suppression systems every 2 meters. Observers will remain behind barrier shields. Medical teams will be on standby. Station security will monitor everything. At the first sign of danger, the demonstration ends and you will be removed from the program. Do you accept these terms? I accept, David said without hesitation. One more thing, Oren added. This is not just about cooking anymore. The Council wants to understand human risk tolerance. They want to see if humans can truly control what others fear. You're not just representing yourself or this institute, you're representing your entire species. The galaxy will be watching. The weight of that responsibility settled on David's shoulders, but he nodded. When can I start preparing? You have 5 days. Submit a list of everything you need. Nothing explosive, nothing toxic, nothing that could breach station hull. The demonstration will occur during the final challenge ceremony. All students and staff will observe. David spent the next 2 days planning every detail. He wrote procedures for fire safety that would satisfy even the most nervous alien administrator. He researched which Earth ingredients could safely pass station biosecurity. He designed a traditional fire pit that would work in the testing bay's contained environment. His fellow students watched him with a mixture of awe and horror. Moth approached him in the library, antennae twitching nervously. David, is it true? You're really going to make fire inside the station? Yes, David confirmed. Want to watch? Moth's compound eyes reflected the library lights in rainbow patterns. I'm terrified, but also curious. Hivers are taught from hatching that fire means death. Yet you seem so calm about it. How? David thought about how to explain. My species grew up with fire. We sat around it for warmth on cold nights. We cooked our food over it. We used it for light before we had electricity. It's not our enemy. It's a tool we learned to use carefully. But don't you fear it? Moth asked. I respect it, David said. That's different. I know fire can hurt me if I'm careless, so I'm not careless. I follow rules that my ancestors learned over thousands of generations. Fire responds predictably if you understand it. More students began asking David questions. Petra wanted to know if her crystalline structure would crack from thermal shock. Ral worried about humidity loss near heat sources. David answered each question patiently, realizing he wasn't just preparing a cooking demonstration. He was teaching an entire station about something they thought they understood, but had only experienced through fear. On the 5th day, David's supplies arrived from Earth, real wood, already tested and certified as non-toxic, charcoal made from sustainable sources, cast iron cookware that had survived multiple generations, fresh ingredients that he would prepare by hand, with real knives and cutting boards that didn't hover or self-clean. He carried everything to Testing Bay 7 and began setting up. The bay was huge, designed for experiments with dangerous chemicals or unstable materials. Suppression nozzles dotted the ceiling. Blast shields could drop in milliseconds. Sensors monitored everything from temperature to air composition. In the center of this high-tech safety chamber, David built something his ancestors would recognize immediately. A circle of stones, a bed for charcoal and wood, a simple grill grate suspended on supports. It looked primitive, surrounded by all the advanced technology. It looked perfect. Oren visited the bay the evening before the demonstration. He walked around David's setup, his 6 arms touching the stones, examining the wood, studying the arrangement. So simple, Oren said quietly. The best things usually are, David replied. Are you nervous? Honestly? Yes, but also excited. Food cooked over fire tastes better than anything a synthesizer can make. Once people try it, they'll understand. Oren nodded slowly. I hope you're right, David, I truly do. Because if this goes wrong, it won't just end your time here. It might set back human integration into the galaxy by decades. David looked at the fire pit he had built and thought about all the humans throughout history who had sat beside similar fires. They had survived. They had thrived. They had created civilization in the glow of controlled flame. Tomorrow he would show the galaxy why humans never gave that up. The observation gallery above Testing Bay 7 filled up 2 hours before the scheduled demonstration. David could see faces pressed against the transparent aluminum barriers. Students, staff members, station workers who had heard rumors about the crazy human and his fire. Security personnel stood at every exit, their hands near emergency controls. Medical teams had set up a triage station just outside the bay. The whole scene felt less like a cooking demonstration and more like preparation for a disaster. David stood in the center of the bay, wearing his chef's jacket from Earth. Around him, he had arranged his ingredients on a simple metal table: fresh vegetables from the station's hydroponics garden, fish from the deepling aquaculture tanks, flour that he had mixed himself for bread. Everything was laid out like he was preparing for a backyard cookout, not performing in front of representatives from a dozen different civilizations. The Galactic Council members arrived precisely on time. David recognized them from his orientation materials. Ambassador Hera from the silicates, her body made of living crystal that refracted light into rainbow patterns. Commander Rin of the Hyver military, his carapace decorated with battle honors. Counselor Dex from the deepling depths, inside a specialized suit that kept his skin moist. 6 others representing species David had only read about. They took their seats in the gallery's front row, separated from the bay by triple-layered barriers and an emergency force field generator. Oren's voice came through the bay's speaker system. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all classifications, today, human student David Reed will demonstrate a cooking technique that has not been performed on any registered space station in recorded history. Safety protocols are engaged. Emergency systems are active. Mr. Reed, you may begin when ready." David took a deep breath and picked up his fire starter kit. It was a simple tool, just flint and steel, the same kind humans had used for thousands of years. He knelt beside his carefully constructed fire pit and struck the flint. Sparks jumped. He struck again, aiming them at the small bundle of dried grass he had prepared as tinder. The moment the first spark caught and a tiny flame appeared, alarms began screaming throughout the station. Red lights flashed. The speaker system blared warnings in 12 languages simultaneously. David heard gasps and shouts from the observation gallery. He ignored all of it and gently blew on his tiny flame, feeding it wisps of grass, watching it grow. In the gallery, chaos erupted. Half the observers scrambled for the exits. Petra's crystalline body flashed bright orange in distress. Moth had flattened himself against the wall as far from the bay as possible. Ral's moisture suit began pumping extra coolant. Security personnel shouted into communication devices. Someone was demanding immediate evacuation of the entire section. Oren's voice cut through the noise, amplified to override the alarms. "Everyone remain calm. The protocols are responding to heat signatures as designed. The human is in a contained environment. There is no immediate danger. Please stay seated." But staying calm proved impossible for beings whose species had evolved to fear fire on an instinctive level. David could see the terror in their faces even as he calmly transferred his small flame to larger pieces of wood. The fire grew, reaching up from the fire pit with orange and yellow fingers. Smoke rose toward the bay's ventilation system, triggering additional sensors. A station administrator David didn't recognize burst into the gallery. "Shut it down. Shut everything down right now. The demonstration has approval from the council," Oren said firmly, though David noticed even his confident voice had a tremor. "We will proceed unless council members themselves order a halt." All eyes turned to Ambassador Hara. Her crystalline structure vibrated with what David had learned was anxiety. She stared at the fire through multiple layers of protective barriers. David added a few pieces of charcoal to the flames, arranging them with a stick to create different heat zones. To him, this was second nature. To everyone watching, it looked like he was playing with death itself. "I've reviewed the human safety data," Hera said slowly, her voice like wind chimes in a storm. "Statistically, they perform this activity billions of times annually with minimal incident. I am frightened, but I am also curious. Let him continue." The administrator looked like he wanted to argue but simply nodded and stepped back. The alarms, mercifully, were silenced, though the warning lights continued their red pulse. David glanced up at the gallery and offered a small wave, trying to show how relaxed he felt. This probably wasn't reassuring given that everyone else saw him standing next to what they considered a bomb. He let the fire burn down until the charcoal glowed with perfect, even heat. While it settled, he prepared his ingredients. He cut vegetables into pieces, seasoned the fish with herbs, mixed water into his flour to form rough dough. His movements were practiced and calm. This was just cooking. This was what humans did. Moth's voice came through the speaker system, quiet but audible. "He's not afraid. Look at him. He's not afraid at all." Humans feel fear differently about certain things, Oren explained to the gallery, taking on a teaching tone despite his own nervousness. Their species has integrated fire into their development. Notice his posture. He's relaxed. His breathing is steady. He positions himself carefully but without panic. This is learned behavior refined over evolutionary time. David placed a flat stone on the edge of his fire pit to heat it for bread. He arranged vegetable skewers on the grill grate. The fish he wrapped in large leaves and placed directly on the coals. These were techniques older than writing, older than cities, older than almost anything humans had created, yet they worked as reliably now as they had millennia ago. The smell reached the observation gallery through the air circulation system. David saw noses twitch, scent organs activate, chemical analyzers start processing. The aroma of cooking food, real cooking, filled the station's recycled air. It was wood smoke and roasting vegetables and searing fish. It was complexity that no synthesizer could replicate because it came from controlled chaos, from organic processes happening in real time. Petra's orange distress color faded slightly. What is that smell? My sensors are detecting thousands of new chemical compounds forming. That's cooking, David called up to the gallery. His voice echoed slightly in the large bay. Real cooking. Organic materials transforming through heat and time. You can't program this in advance because every fire is different. Every piece of food is unique. You have to feel it, adjust it, respond to what's happening. He turned a skewer, checking the char marks on the vegetables. Perfect. He shifted the fish package with a stick, judging its position by the smell and sizzle. The bread dough went onto his hot stone, where it began to puff and brown. Every movement was deliberate but fluid, a dance humans had been doing since they lived in caves. Commander Rin leaned forward in his seat, antennae extended fully toward the bay. It's not random chaos. There's pattern to his movements. Decision trees. He's reading the fire's behavior and responding. Exactly, Oren said, and David could hear the wonder creeping into his teacher's voice. He's not fighting the fire or fearing it. He's partnering with it. This is what we lost when we moved to pure synthesis. This relationship between cook and heat. The security personnel had relaxed slightly. The medical teams looked less tense. Even the administrator who had wanted to shut everything down was watching with reluctant fascination. David smiled to himself as he worked. The hardest part wasn't the cooking. It was getting everyone to stay calm long enough to see that fire, treated with knowledge and respect, was a friend humans had known for a very long time. David moved around the fire pit like a musician playing an instrument he had practiced with his whole life. He flipped the vegetable skewers at exactly the right moment, achieving those perfect grill marks that added both flavor and texture. The fish package he rotated carefully, using 2 sticks as makeshift tongs. The bread puffed up beautifully on the hot stone, its surface browning with spots that would taste slightly crisp and smoky. In the observation gallery, the initial panic had transformed into something else entirely. Fascination, maybe, or confusion about why this terrifying process looked so ordinary in the human's hands. David could see students taking notes, council members leaning forward. Even the security personnel were watching the food rather than monitoring their emergency systems. The monitoring equipment told a story that made no sense to anyone except David. Temperature, readings spiked and dropped. Heat distribution changed constantly. Smoke composition varied by the second. By galactic standards, this should have been a disaster of uncontrolled variables. But David knew better. These weren't chaotic accidents. They were the natural behavior of fire, and he was simply reading what the fire was telling him. He pulled the fish from the coals and unwrapped the leaves carefully. Steam rose, carrying smells of lemon, herbs, and perfectly cooked seafood. The leaves had charred on the outside but protected the fish inside, keeping it moist while infusing it with flavor. He placed it on a clean plate and moved to check his bread. Fascinating. Counselor Dex's watery voice bubbled through his translator. The human is using the fire's natural variation as part of the cooking process, not fighting against it. Our species would never accept such unpredictability. That's why your food tastes like nothing, David wanted to say, but he kept focused on his work. Words could come later. Right now, he needed to let his cooking speak for itself. He removed the bread from the stone and immediately brushed it with a mixture of oil and crushed garlic. The bread was rustic, rough-edged, with a crust that had dark spots from direct contact with hot stone. It looked nothing like the perfect geometric shapes that came from synthesizers. It looked like real bread. It smelled like heaven. The vegetables came off the grill next. Bell peppers with blackened skin that would peel away to reveal sweet, smoky flesh underneath. Squash that had caramelized edges. Mushrooms that had absorbed smoke and concentrated their flavor. David arranged everything on plates with simple efficiency. This wasn't fancy restaurant plating. This was honest food, cooked well, ready to eat. Petra's voice carried a note of something David hadn't heard from her before, almost hunger. The molecular complexity is extraordinary. My sensors are overwhelmed. How is this possible without computational assistance? It's possible because this is how cooking actually works, Oren answered, his teaching instincts overriding his nervousness. What we do with synthesizers is imitation. We analyze food and recreate it. But real cooking is transformation, the Maillard reaction, caramelization, smoke absorption. These happen naturally through heat and time. We've been trying to program nature instead of working with it. David let the fire burn down to coals while his food rested on the plates. This part was important too, though aliens who ate synthesized food wouldn't know that. Cooked food needed a few minutes to settle, for juices to redistribute, for flavors to integrate. His grandmother had taught him that. Her grandmother had taught her. The knowledge went back through generations of humans who understood that good food required patience. Moth had moved closer to the observation barrier, his earlier fear apparently overcome by curiosity. "David, may I ask a question?" "Of course," David called back. "Your heart rate has been monitored throughout this process. It's been completely steady, normal resting rate. How is that possible?" "You're surrounded by fire," David laughed. "Moth, my friend. I've been cooking like this since I was 8 years old. My father taught me at our family cabin. We'd catch fish from the lake and cook them right on the shore. This," he gestured at his setup, "is actually easier than those campfire cookouts because the fire pit is purpose-built and I have level ground and good tools." "But the danger," Moth insisted. "There's danger in anything if you're careless," David said. He picked up a stick and showed them. "See this? I use it to move hot things. I never put my hands directly in the fire. I position myself upwind of smoke so it doesn't get in my eyes. I keep water nearby just in case. I maintain the fire pit properly so coals don't roll out. These are simple rules that humans learn young. Follow them and fire is safe. Ignore them and yes, you can get hurt. But the same is true of any tool." Ambassador Hera's crystalline structure had shifted through several colors during the demonstration. Now she glowed a warm amber that David's research suggested was contentment or interest. The human makes it seem so simple, but I watched him build that fire. Every stick placement was deliberate. Every piece of charcoal positioned specifically. The randomness we see is actually highly controlled, we just don't recognize the control method. "Exactly right, Ambassador," David confirmed. He plated the last of his food, creating 6 portions. Cooking with fire requires attention and knowledge, but humans have had a long time to develop both. We don't think about it any more than you think about breathing. It's natural to us. The food sat ready on plates that David had warmed by the fire. The spread included everything he had cooked, enough for multiple people to taste. The colors were rich and varied, not the uniform appearance of synthesized food. The textures were diverse, from crispy bread crust to tender fish flesh. And the smells, those incredible smells had permeated the entire testing bay and beyond. David looked up at the observation gallery. "Who wants to try it?" Silence. Not the frightened silence from earlier, but uncertainty. No one in that gallery had ever eaten food cooked over fire. Their cultures had moved past it. Their safety regulations forbade it. Their instincts warned against it. But David could see the curiosity in their faces, especially now that the flames had died down to a gentle glow of coals. Oren stood up in the gallery. "I will." His voice was firm, decided. "If we're teaching cooking, we must understand all methods, even those we fear. I volunteer to be first." The gallery erupted in concerned chatter. Several students tried to dissuade their teacher. But Oren was already moving toward the bay entrance. Medical staff swarmed him, checking vital signs, preparing emergency equipment. The security chief personally reviewed protocols. Through it all, Oren remained calm. David watched through the bay's airlock as his teacher went through decontamination procedures, even though nothing about the fire was actually contaminating. Station protocols didn't know how to handle this situation, so they applied every safety measure available. Finally, after several minutes of preparation, the inner airlock door opened and Oren stepped into the testing bay. He stood at the entrance, his 6 arms held close to his body in a defensive posture. The fire had been reduced to glowing coals barely visible, but heat still radiated from the fire pit. David could see Oren's muscles tense as he approached across the bay floor. "Welcome to my kitchen," David said with a warm smile, trying to ease the tension. "Come on, the food's getting cold." Oren approached the table where David had set out the plates. His eyes moved between the food and the fire pit, monitoring the potential threat. David understood. To Oren, the fire was still dangerous even in its calm coal state. Instinct and culture said so. But his teacher was choosing courage over fear, curiosity over safety. David picked up a plate and held it out. "Try the fish first." It's cooked in a traditional earth method called en papillote, which means in paper, though I used leaves instead. The heat steams the fish inside its wrapping, keeping it moist while the smoke flavors it. Oren's hands trembled slightly as he took the plate. Oren held the plate in 4 of his 6 hands while his other 2 reached for the eating utensil David offered. His movements were slow, careful, like someone defusing a bomb rather than about to eat dinner. The fish sat there looking perfectly ordinary, steam still rising from its surface, but to Oren it represented something his species hadn't touched in millennia. David waited patiently. He knew this moment mattered more than all his explanations. People could theorize about fire cooking all day, but taste would tell the truth. Oren lifted a small piece of fish to his mouth. The observation gallery had gone completely silent. David could hear the ventilation system humming, the quiet crackle of cooling coals and nothing else. Every being in that space held their breath as Oren tasted food cooked over fire for the first time in his life. The master chef's expression changed. All 6 of his hands began trembling, but not from fear anymore. His eyes closed. He took another bite, larger this time. Then another. When he finally opened his eyes, they were wet with emotion. "This is," Oren's voice cracked slightly, "this is what food is supposed to taste like. This is what we lost." The observation gallery exploded with noise. Students shouted questions. Council members demanded details. Security personnel looked confused about whether they should be happy or concerned. Oren ignored all of it, taking another bite of the fish with something approaching reverence on his face. "The smoke," Oren said, speaking to David but loud enough for the microphones to catch. "It adds dimension, layer upon layer of flavor, and the texture. The way the outside is slightly different from the inside. Synthesizers make everything uniform. This is complex. This is alive." David felt relief wash through him. "Want to try the vegetables?" "The char adds sweetness." Oren didn't answer with words, just reached for a piece of grilled pepper. His reaction was similar, wonder mixed with something like grief. "We've been eating imitations of food for so long we forgot what the original tasted like." "How did we lose this?" "Fear made you careful, which is good," David said gently. "But maybe too careful. Sometimes the old ways are old because they work, not because they're outdated." Ambassador Hera's voice came through the speaker system. "Master Chef Oren, is it truly that significant?" "The difference?" Oren looked up at the observation gallery and his face was transformed. He looked younger somehow, excited like a student making his first discovery. "Ambassador, I have eaten in the finest establishments across 12 star systems. I have tasted rare delicacies and ancient recipes recreated by the most advanced synthesizers available. None of it, nothing, compares to this simple meal cooked by a first-year student over burning wood." Commander Rin stood abruptly. "I wish to try this food." "As do I," Counselor Dex added. "And I," Ambassador Hera's crystalline voice chimed. Within moments, every council member was requesting access to the testing bay. The security chief looked panicked. "Honored Council, the protocols don't allow for multiple beings in the hazard zone." "Then change the protocols," Ambassador Hara said with finality. "If Master Chef Oren is safe, we can be safe. I did not travel across 2 star systems to watch someone eat. I came to observe human culture. This is clearly a significant aspect of that culture." The security chief tried to argue, but council authority overruled him. Within minutes, preparations began to bring the council members into the bay. Medical teams expanded their setup. Additional monitoring equipment was brought online. Emergency response teams positioned themselves at multiple entry points, all of this to allow a few beings to taste some grilled vegetables and fish. While preparations continued, more requests came in. Students wanted to try the food. Staff members did too. Even some of the security personnel looked interested, though they tried to hide it behind professional expressions. The word had spread throughout the station, carried by the ventilation system's delivery of those incredible smells. Everywhere the scent reached, people asked what was creating it. David looked at his plates and realized he had a problem. Master Chef? I only made enough for maybe 8 or 10 people. There's at least 50 beings who want to taste this now. Oren, still savoring a piece of bread, smiled with all 3 of his mouth parts. Then I suppose you'll need to cook more. Do you have additional ingredients? Some, but not enough for this many people. I'll arrange for more supplies to be brought to the bay. Can you maintain the fire? David looked at his fire pit. The coals were perfect for cooking, and he had more wood and charcoal in reserve. I can keep it going for hours if needed. Then do so. Today's demonstration has become something larger. Today we teach the galaxy that some fears can be overcome. Oren paused. Also, I'm not leaving until I've tried everything you can cook. The council members entered the bay one at a time, each going through elaborate safety procedures. Ambassador Hara came first, her crystalline body refracting the light from the coals into rainbow patterns on the bay's walls. She approached the fire pit slowly, and David could see her structure vibrating with nervousness. The heat won't damage you, David assured her. Your species is silicon-based, right? Silicon has a very high melting point. You're actually more heat-resistant than I am. Hera seemed surprised by this. We've avoided heat for so long, I had forgotten our physical properties. You're correct. Intellectually, I know I'm safe. But instinct is powerful. Instinct kept your people alive, David said. Never apologize for that. But maybe today instinct can learn something new. He handed her a plate with vegetables and bread. She manipulated the food with delicate crystal fingers, examining it from multiple angles before finally tasting it. Her entire body flashed through a spectrum of colors, settling on a warm golden glow. Extraordinary. The molecular transformation from heat creates flavors that shouldn't exist according to our synthesis models. How do you capture this? How do you program for these variables? You don't program them, David explained. You feel them. You learn to read the fire, understand the food, pay attention to what's happening. Every meal is unique because you're working with natural processes, not following a strict formula. One by one, the council members came through. Councillor Dex, in his moisture suit, was concerned about the dry heat until David prepared some fish specifically for him, kept moist and cool on the edges. Commander Rin, whose species had burned their cities millennia ago, stood for a long time just staring at the coals before finally accepting a plate. When he tasted the food, his antennae spread wide in pleasure, a response David learned meant extreme satisfaction. More supplies arrived. David found himself cooking continuously, managing multiple items at different heat zones. This was exactly like working a busy dinner service at the restaurant where he had trained before coming to the Institute, except instead of impatient dinner customers, his audience was composed of alien beings experiencing fire-cooked food for the first time in their lives. Petra finally worked up the courage to enter the bay. Her orange distress coloring had faded completely. She approached David's work area and watched him arrange fresh vegetables on the grill. "Can I help?" she asked quietly. David smiled. "Have you ever cooked with fire before?" "No, but I'd like to learn. First rule, respect the heat. Second rule, never stop paying attention. Third rule, trust your senses. Come on, I'll show you how to turn the skewers." He gave her a long-handled tool and guided her through the process of rotating vegetables to cook them evenly. Her crystalline hands moved with surprising grace. The heat didn't bother her at all, as David had predicted. Within minutes, she was managing her own section of the grill while David worked on another area. Moth entered next, his fear clearly still present, but overridden by curiosity. Then Ral in his moisture suit. Then other students David barely knew. Soon there were a dozen beings in the testing bay, all crowded around the fire pit, all watching David cook or trying to help under his guidance. The security chief gave up trying to maintain protocols. The medical teams looked bored. The emergency systems remained on standby but unused. What had started as a terrifying demonstration had become something else entirely. It had become a party. A gathering, a moment of shared discovery. David looked around at all the different species working together around his simple fire pit. This was what he had hoped for when he proposed the demonstration, though he never imagined it would grow so large. He caught Oren's eye across the bay. His teacher was showing a group of students how to judge doneness by smell rather than instruments. The master chef looked happier than David had ever seen him. "More food," someone called from the observation gallery. "We want to try it too." Testing Bay 7 had become something it was never designed to be. Instead of a sterile environment for dangerous experiments, it now looked like a festival ground. Beings from a dozen species crowded around David's fire pit, some cooking under his guidance, others waiting to taste what came off the grill. The observation gallery had emptied as everyone found reasons to enter the bay. Security had stopped trying to manage the chaos and simply joined in. David worked at the center of it all, directing traffic around the fire pit like a conductor leading an orchestra. He showed Petra how to achieve perfect grill marks. He taught Moth that his species' natural ability to sense chemical changes made him excellent at judging doneness. He helped Ral adapt recipes for his species' different nutritional needs. The fear that had dominated the early demonstration had evaporated completely, replaced by excitement and hunger. Supplies kept arriving from the station's food storage. David had requested basic ingredients, but the staff kept bringing more. Vegetables from hydroponics, proteins from various alien farming methods, spices and herbs from a dozen worlds. Some ingredients David recognized, others were completely foreign. He experimented with everything, discovering that deepling kelp became incredibly crispy when grilled, that hexapod fungi developed a rich, meaty flavor over smoke, that silicate mineral supplements caramelized like sugar when heated properly. "David, what about this?" Ral held up something that looked like a purple root vegetable. "It's from my homeworld. We usually eat it raw in cold water. Let's try grilling it," David suggested. "Worst case, we learn it doesn't work. Best case, we discover something amazing." They sliced the root and placed it on the grill. After a few minutes, it developed a golden crust, and its smell changed from watery and bland to sweet and complex. Ral tasted it cautiously. Then his eyes widened in his moisture suit. "I've eaten this vegetable my entire life and never knew it could taste like this," Ral said with wonder in his voice. "The heat brings out flavors that don't exist when it's raw." Word of that discovery spread quickly. Soon other species were bringing ingredients from their homeworlds, eager to see how fire would transform them. Each success felt like a small revelation. Each discovery proved that fire cooking wasn't just a human technique. It was a universal tool that had applications across all of galactic civilization. Ambassador Hera stood near the fire pit, her crystalline structure now glowing with contentment rather than fear. She had removed most of her protective gear after realizing the heat wouldn't damage her. Now she helped David manage the coals, her precise control letting her arrange them with perfect accuracy. "Ambassador, I have to admit I didn't expect this," David said as he worked alongside her. "I thought I'd cook a meal, people would taste it, and that would be the end." "You underestimated the power of good food," Hera replied. "But more than that, you showed us something we had forgotten. Our species became so focused on safety that we eliminated risk entirely. We thought we were being wise. Instead, we were limiting ourselves." Commander Rin approached with a plate of what he had cooked himself, grilled proteins with char marks that looked almost artistic.
"David, taste this."
"Tell me if I did it correctly." David tried the food and nodded with approval. "Perfect. See how the outside is crispy but the inside is still tender. That's exactly what you want." The commander's antennae vibrated with pride. "My ancestors would be ashamed that I feared fire. They used it daily before our cities burned. Perhaps it's time the hivers remembered how to work with heat safely, rather than avoiding it entirely." Oren moved through the crowd with 6 plates balanced in his arms, distributing food to those waiting to eat. He had completely abandoned his role as formal instructor, and now acted more like an enthusiastic student. David caught his eye and smiled. His teacher smiled back, and in that moment David knew everything had changed. The smell of cooking food had spread throughout the entire station by now. The ventilation system had carried it to every deck, every corridor, every living space. People who hadn't been anywhere near testing Bay 7 were suddenly appearing in the area, following their noses and their curiosity. Station administration had given up trying to control the situation. This had become an event, spontaneous and joyful. Someone brought music equipment, Soft melodies from various homeworlds began playing. A silicate student started a traditional dance near the fire pit, her crystalline body reflecting the firelight in beautiful patterns. Others joined in, creating an impromptu celebration that mixed cultures and species in ways that rarely happened on the usually formal station. David found a moment to sit down on one of the equipment crates. Just watching the scene he had created, Moth sat beside him, mandibles clicking softly, and what David had learned was contentment. "You changed something today," Moth said quietly. "Something bigger than cooking." "I just made dinner," David replied, though he knew Moth was right. "No, you showed us that fear can be overcome with knowledge, that old ways aren't always inferior to new ways, that humans kept fire cooking not because they were too primitive to advance, but because they understood its value." Moth paused. "My species has feared fire for 2,000 years. Today I cooked with it. That fear is genetic, coded into my very cells, but I still did it. Because you showed me how." David felt emotion tighten his throat. "That means a lot, Moth, thank you." More students approached, asking questions about fire safety, about cooking techniques, about how to set up fire pits on their own worlds. David answered each question patiently. He had come to the Galactic Culinary Institute to learn, but instead, he had become a teacher in ways he never expected. As evening shifted into night by the station's artificial day cycle, the feast continued. The fire pit burned steady and warm, maintained now by multiple hands who had learned to read it and respond to it. Food kept coming off the grill. People kept eating, kept talking, kept laughing across species barriers that had seemed solid just hours before. Counselor Dex approached David with what passed for a smile on his aquatic features. "Mr. Reed, the council has discussed your demonstration. We have a proposal." David stood, suddenly nervous again. "A proposal?" "We want to establish fire cooking as an official course at the Institute. Not as a historical curiosity, but as a legitimate culinary technique. We want proper facilities built, not hazard bays. We want students from all species to have the opportunity to learn what you've shown us today." Dex paused. "We want you to be the instructor." David felt his mind go blank for a moment. "Me? But I'm just a first-year student." "You're a human who understands fire the way most species understand water or air," Ambassador Hera said, joining the conversation. "You have knowledge that the galaxy needs. Will you teach us?" David looked around the testing bay. At Petra, carefully turning vegetable skewers with newfound confidence. At Moth, teaching other students about judging doneness by chemical scent. At Ral, experimenting with temperature zones for different ingredients. At Oren, laughing with students while smoke curled around them all. At dozens of beings from dozens of worlds gathered around a simple fire, sharing food and joy. "Yes," David said. "I'll teach you. All of you." The announcement was met with cheers. Someone started playing music with a faster beat. The celebration grew louder, more energetic. David found himself pulled into dances he didn't know, taught steps by aliens whose legs bent in different directions than his. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except this moment of connection. Hours later, as the fire finally began to die down to embers, David sat with his back against a wall, exhausted but happy. The testing bay was a mess. Cooking equipment scattered everywhere. Empty plates stacked haphazardly. The smell of smoke and food and too many beings in one space. It would take days to clean properly. It was perfect. Oren settled down beside him, all 6 arms hanging loose with fatigue. "David, do you know what you've accomplished today?" "I made some people less afraid of fire. You reminded us why cooking matters. Not the food itself, though that's important, but the gathering, the sharing. The moment when different beings sit around heat and nourishment and become community." Oren looked at the dying embers. "We lost that when we moved to synthesizers. We gained efficiency but lost soul. You gave us our soul back." David watched the last flames dance among the coals. His grandmother had told him once that humans had always gathered around fires. That something in human DNA responded to firelight, to the smell of smoke, to the warmth of coals. It was written into who they were as a species. Today he had shared that ancient human tradition with beings who had evolved on worlds he'd never see, under suns with different colors, breathing different air. And it had worked. It had connected them all. "Master Chef," David said quietly, "I think I finally understand what the Culinary Institute is really teaching." "What's that?" "It's not about techniques or recipes or even food. It's about finding ways to bring people together. That's what good cooking does. It crosses boundaries. It creates moments where differences don't matter because everyone is sharing something good. Oren nodded slowly. And now you sound like a teacher. Good. You'll need that wisdom for your new position. The station's night cycle deepened. Slowly, reluctantly, people began leaving the testing bay. They took with them full stomachs, new knowledge, and memories of the day a human taught the galaxy to stop fearing fire. David remained behind to ensure the fire pit was completely cool and safe. It was the responsible thing to do, the final lesson in proper fire management. As he raked through the last ashes, making certain no embers remained, David thought about the journey that had brought him here. He had come to the stars expecting to learn alien cooking methods. Instead, he had taught aliens the oldest cooking method humans knew. He had expected to be a student. Instead, he had become a teacher. Most importantly, he had expected to feel small and insignificant in the vast galactic community. Instead, he had shown that humans had gifts to offer, knowledge worth sharing, traditions that could enrich everyone. Tomorrow, there would be meetings about curriculum and facility construction. There would be safety protocols to develop and teaching plans to write. There would be work, lots of it. But tonight, David allowed himself to simply enjoy what had happened. He had lit a fire on a space station where fire was forbidden. He had fed dozens of beings who had never tasted properly cooked food. He had helped others face their fears and discover joy. Not bad for a first-year culinary student. David smiled, closed the testing bay's doors behind him, and headed to his quarters. The smell of smoke clung to his chef's jacket. He decided not to wash it just yet. It was a good smell. The smell of success. The smell of the day humans taught the galaxy to cook with fire again, and in doing so taught them something far more important, that the old ways, the primitive ways, the human ways, still had value in a modern universe. Sometimes the best path forward was to remember where you came from and bring those traditions with you to the stars.